This episode is sponsored by Lookout Games. Hello and welcome to episode 49 of the Board Game Geek podcast, where we geek out about board games, the mechanisms behind them, and the people who create them. I'm your host, Candace Harris, and I am so excited to be here today with Amy, the thinker side of the ThinkerThemer YouTube channel, which I love. Although I say today, but it's tomorrow for you because you're in Melbourne, right?
It is tomorrow and it's winter. So wild things are happening here in Australia. Thank you for accommodating our time zone, Candace.
Anytime. I'm so glad that we saw each other. We got to play games together at Gen Con, and it's just great. Like, you're the perfect person to have on for a Gen Con recap episode.
I love Gen Con. It's the best. And I especially love seeing you every year.
Oh, thank you. It is so fun. I'm sorry I missed Dice Tower West. I'm going to try to fix that next year if you and Maggie are going.
Yes, please. We're always there. Love to see you there.
Cool. So how's everything been going with you? I know you had a crazy jet lag situation.
I did. So it's a long trip from Melbourne all the way through to Indianapolis. And usually we break it up on the way back. We might stop somewhere, but we decided to go straight through. So we had 3 flights from Indianapolis to Denver, Denver to San Francisco direct to Melbourne, which that in and of itself is a 15-hour flight. So it was around 30 hours of travel. And we landed Wednesday morning and I went straight to the office. So trying to really maximize my leave. So I went straight to work and I was pretty tired by the afternoon. And then, jet lag is so funny because you could be so exhausted and you fall asleep. And then 3 a.m. on the dot, I'm wide awake, mind racing. So it took a couple of days to get back into the swing of things. But it's really, I've finally recovered and it's nice to be home always.
Wow. I have no room to complain with my little 3-hour time difference. The East Coast. Oh my gosh. Yeah, we had our flight was delayed on the way back, but I was it's like I'm hearing stories of so many people having worse flight issues. So I was like, a little 2-hour delay is not that big of a deal. And it just gave us more time to play games at the airport.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? It's like Gen Con, if there's a flight delay, you're like, great, more games, because they set up all of those gaming tables in and around the gates, which is so fantastic. And you don't see that anywhere else.
No, you don't. And it's so cool because I remember the first time I came to Gen Con, it was like there were signs, I think, in the airport that's like, welcome gamers. Yes. And the whole city is kind of like taken over, for Gen Con, and it's really, really cool.
Apparently it's the biggest event they have, which is just wild.
Wow. And guess what? We actually had a couple people from Australia on my flight back to LA. Stella from Maple University, Phil Walker Harding was also on my flight. And Phil was going back to Sydney and Stella was going back to Melbourne. And it was crazy because of our flight delay. They had to do that thing where they're like, hey, everybody who's taking this connecting flight to Melbourne, let them out first. Cause they had, Stella barely made her flight.
Oh, I'm glad she made it. Actually, we were staying with Stella. So we also had a very Australian hotel room going on as well. And the last night, we were all trying to pack the, 150 games that were in our hotel room. So we had a bit of a punch party to get all of that back, all the way to Australia.
Love it. Yeah, I bumped into Stella when we were in line to kind of drop off our bags at the airport. And she had like a cart of, 4 suitcases, a treasure chest, all sorts of things. But it was cool that we actually did get a game in for once, because I don't think I had ever played a game with her. We bump into each other every con so many times. She is the most bumped into person for me at Essen and Gen Con.
She is like up at all hours, always going between meetings and things. Like, she works very hard.
Well, I'm glad everybody made it back to Australia safely. And considering we both had a fantastic time playing games, demoing games, seeing people, all that good stuff at Gen Con 2024. Today, we're going to talk about some of our experiences at Gen Con and also, more importantly, the games we played. Not all of them, probably, but we'll talk about a decent amount of games we played, some that maybe I only played, some that maybe Amy played and I haven't played, and we even played a few together.
We did, the best of times.
Yep. We have a tradition now of meeting up at the BGG Hot Games Room at the Hyatt one night and playing some games together, and it's super fun always.
It is, and it's always really late at night, and we're trying to learn rules, and we're trying to stay awake. But that's what I love about Gen Con, is just the energy that keeps you going.
Totally. Well, today, we're going to talk about some of the games we played at Gen Con 2024. Some things that maybe I played and Amy hasn't. Some games that Amy played and I haven't. And a couple that we played together. But before we dig into the games, I'm really curious to hear how your Gen Con experience this year compared to previous years.
Yeah, this was our 5th trip to Gen Con. The first time we went, we were very new to the hobby. It was back in 2016. It was the year that Scythe was released, and everybody was lining up for this game that we knew nothing about. In hindsight, we were like, wild. Wow, that was a pretty big release. We should have been lining up. But at the time, we were just extremely new to it all, and it was so overwhelming just walking around and experiencing it. And I can't even remember that much from the first time, but since then, we've been trying to go to Gen Con every year. It is a long trip from Australia, but it's one of our favorite cons just because all of I would say it's a very extroverted con.
Oh, yeah.
So it is like a whirlwind of socializing, of energy. The best way I can describe it to people, and I think the biggest difference between Gen Con and Essenspiel is that I feel like Gen Con is much more of a spectacle. Spectacle is the word I would use, because there's so much cosplay going on. You've got, even those balloon sculptures, the card harlot, all the things that are going on around. And then there's all of these events going on as well. And it feels like as an individual, you're only experiencing such a small proportion of what's going on. There's just everybody is in their own little geeky dream, doing focusing on the things that make them happy, and I just love that. And so it's all the lining up and the franticness that keeps us coming back. Maggie she's much more introverted, so she has these breaks where she offers to generously take our games back to the hotel, but then she disappears. Yeah. And she comes back hours later, and I'm like, well, that was a long trip back to the hotel, but I know it's just her recharging, because it is just so full on the whole time.
Sensory overload completely. And I was actually nervous when I heard it was sold out. I'm like, is this just going to be such a hot mess and crazy? But I was really pleasantly surprised that even though 71,000 people were there, it's so spread out, like you're saying. It's there are things that are happening at the Colts Stadium. There are things that are happening upstairs and different places, all sorts of events. So even when at the busiest times when you're walking around the hall, and, sometimes you're behind slow people because everybody's wants to stop and look at everything, which I totally get. I do the same thing. But you still I feel like any game you wanted to walk up to a table and listen to an overview or demo, it's not like you had to wait that long. And I'm not saying that because I have my BGG jersey on and maybe sometimes I get to skip the line, but I really felt I was that's really awesome about this. Even though it is so crowded, everybody's just spread out doing all sorts of things in their geeky paradise or whatever you just said.
Yeah, one thing that I did notice is that the days were a bit unusual, for the crowd. So the Thursday, you have that classic crowd crush when everybody waits for the expo halls to open. And that is just absolutely wild. And we were there in amongst the crowds waiting for the doors to open. And of course, that's always the same. But then usually the vendors, I know that they anticipate Saturday being one of the bigger shopping days. And what I was hearing is that it wasn't one of the bigger days. And so, and Sunday was incredibly busy. I don't know if you tried walking the halls on Sunday, but it was really difficult to get from one side to the other. And I wondered if it had something to do with, the 50th anniversary of D&D was happening at the time. And so maybe there were a lot of people who were at D&D events on the Saturday and then didn't get to the halls until Sunday, or something was going on, but it was a bit unusual compared to other years.
Yeah, that's really unusual. And there are a lot of people that go to Gen Con who are into like the RPG side of gaming versus board games. So that's always cool, because I think there was somebody sitting behind me on the plane and they struck up a conversation. I was like, oh, these are RPG people that went to Gen Con. And I think it was like either my first or second year going, I was sitting in the same aisle as two other people going, and they had no idea what Board Game Geek was. And I was like, oh, really? But it turned out they were RPG people. And so it's cool to just connect with so many different people that are there and have all sorts of different interests. And I guess the other thing with the rush is, and I don't know, so I've only been going to Gen Con since 2021, and that was the weird year, right after the pandemic when they had it in September. And so each year there have been more and more people. But I also noticed, and I don't know if before the pandemic, basically like every publisher, I feel like, who has some kind of hot game only has like a limited amount of them. So it's like, hey, we're only selling 50 copies of this, and then like each day though. So they'll allot an amount per day. And there's so many games like that. So people just rush in the morning because they're trying to get those hot games.
I feel that in my soul, Candice. Every year, part of our routine, and you do get into some good routines for Gen Con. That's one thing I love about it is, you've been going for a few years now, but I'm sure you're starting to do the same things over and over on the same days, and it becomes a bit of a routine that you look forward to. And one of those things is that I create a list for myself for that first shopping day, but also I make a list begrudgingly for Maggie, who gets given a list of lines to go and line up in, and she I sent her off to Comic Hunters, and I sent her off to some of the harder games to get, and she texted me when I was in a different line, and she's like, I have failed you. So she was very disappointed in her day one, performance, but at least there's multiple days and they do withhold copies, so you can try each morning to go back and try to get those games that got away the days prior.
I failed you. Oh, poor Maggie.
Oh, poor Maggie. Makes
She's
me
in
sound
there
horrible.
with the sensory overload and everything. Yeah, I totally feel you in terms of like routines. Like now, the past, I don't know if it was the first year I went, or it started in 2022, but there are all these like media events. So that's a great time, because that's usually where we see all the content creators, some designers and different publishers. And it seems like everybody kind of gets invited to the same meeting. So you hop around to different ones. And, so I look forward to that, because it's like, I know we're going to get to connect with people and see everybody and say hi before the storm really happens when the show opens on Thursday. And then, of course, we have our hot games room night. That's definitely been a tradition the past couple years. But
I love that. We often play a lot of trick-taking games with you, and I always look forward to that. It's one of my highlights of the con.
Same here. Yeah, I find that I end up playing a lot of like card games or shorter games while I'm there, because it's like you want to play with more people, you want to get more games in, and they're just more convenient. So like some of the games that we're going to be talking about, I'm sure, are fit that kind of mold. The other thing is we were talking about routines.
Yeah, we have a few routines. So we always get the Wednesday merch. So as a hot tip, if you get in the day before Gen Con, the merch store is open for Gen Con. I'm wearing my Gen Con sweater right now, actually. But
nice.
because, if you've been to Gen Con, you'll know that the merch line is huge for the rest of the day. So if you get on Wednesday, you can get your badge early, but then you can also line up for merch. So that's something that we always do. We still had to wait an hour even on the Wednesday to buy all of our T-shirts and jumpers and things to bring home. And then, there's the food as well of, the island noodles that everyone tries to sneak out for. Have you not had the island noodles?
I have not had, Look, I've never had any Gen Con merch or seen that whole situation of people going to get it. And I don't know, are you saying iron noodles?
Oh, island noodles. Sorry,
island noodles. Okay. What?
Yeah, island noodles. So, most people I think would line up at some point in the con for this extra long noodle line where you get this box of noodles. But the best thing about it is it has broccoli in it. And if you know anything about con food, often by the end of it, I'm just desperately wanting fruit and vegetables. For me, the highlight of the noodles is the broccoli. Just like, get some vegetables.
Yeah, getting some vegetables in there. They're sneaking them in.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's the Harry and Izzy's where they have this famous shrimp cocktail. Maggie and I always make a trip there. But most of the time we're eating burgers. So it's not the best diet.
Yeah. Yeah, con eating is often very rough. At the Hyatt, they have a Subway. And they stay open till 2 a.m. And that's great because sometimes I haven't had dinner till like 11 p.m. And I'm like, I want to keep gaming. So let me just run down to Subway.
Yeah, you have to take care of yourself. That's a key part of con life.
One of the things that was a lot different for me this year, not a lot, but yeah, actually a lot different for me, is that usually I set up a whole bunch of meetings and I'm bouncing from publisher to publisher, having meetings and basically collecting notes for writing a BGG or multiple BGG news posts, getting pictures and everything. And this year I refocused and I was doing a lot of video footage instead. So I scheduled less meetings so I could kind of be spontaneous and just see what was this looks cool. Let's do a quick video on it. So we're just starting to roll those videos out. And so it's really fun. I think I'm going to be doing it at Essen too. And, definitely learn some lessons from doing it this first time. But I like it. It was really fun.
I really admire anyone who makes content in situ. It is not easy to do. And we always joke that we are the worst content creators because we just forget to take photos. We actually struggle with vlogging. So I'm very impressed that you could, create those videos at the time.
Thank you. Awesome. Well, should we get into these games? I want to hear about what you've been playing at Gen Con. And I also am excited to talk to you because, we didn't really get to recap on some of the games we played together. So
I always love talking games with you, Candice.
Oh, thanks, Amy. Okay, you go first. What's first on your list?
Well, you know how we were talking about playing board games in the airport on the way out.
Yep.
Well, we had quite a long wait at the airport because we got there quite early. We didn't want to miss that flight home to Australia. And we bumped into Ilya and Tyler from Kovray. And
nice.
They were like, let's sit down and play a game together. And we spent hours just playing this game, but we played a game called Intarsia, which is a game that is, it released at Gen Con, but I don't think it got a lot of hype around it prior to the con because I'm not sure they had it. It arrived just in time for Gen Con.
Gotcha.
And so I didn't hear anything about it beforehand. So this was a bit of a surprise for me, but it is designed by Michael Kiesling, who is, of course, the designer of Azul. And so it does have that puzzly, abstract quality about it, but it is a much bigger and deeper game than Azul. It's by Pegasus Spiel, and that plays 2 to 4 players. And basically this game, I didn't know what Intarsia was, but if you're listening and you don't know what that is either, it's actually the intricate wooden inlay designs that become part of like flooring. So yeah, so those intricate pieces of wood that come together to create like a repeating pattern. That's the theme of the game, and you are trying to create this filigree flooring. So it's really interesting because the patterns, the game, the pieces are very deluxe. They're all wooden pieces, and they click together really nicely to create this pattern. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to build each of these filigree designs from the outside in. So you start with the outside of the pattern, and then you've got these pieces that slot in and get progressively smaller until you've completed the pattern.
Cool.
That's kind of what you're doing thematically, but then mechanically you have a handful of cards, and you're trying to spend these cards in an efficient way in order to purchase the pieces that you need. And you can only use certain colored cards to buy certain colored pieces. And then on the board that you're building, you also have, you're restricted in terms of where you can place different colors. And then you have to purchase connecting pieces in order to spread out on the board. And so it's really interesting. And the main tension in the game is really thinking about what piece you want to purchase in what order, because the smaller the piece that you're buying, so the more progressed you are with the pattern, the more cards you get in return for purchasing that piece. So you're like, okay, I'm gonna build this small piece which costs me 3 or 4 cards, but then it's going to give me 3 new cards, and then in my next turn I'll be able to spend those 3 cards. So you're trying to chain and elongate your turns in the round, because you can only keep playing so long as you have cards in your hand. So some people are going to end up passing while you're like, haha, I have puzzled this out and I'm still purchasing pieces. And then the other part of this game is that when you achieve certain patterns on your board, you're going to get given a tool. And this tool is going to give you victory points. But then if you are able to collect the same type of tool, it combos and it builds on that score. So it's going to basically trigger every like tool that you collect after that. And so you're also thinking about that. What pattern do I want to achieve next so I can get the same tool that's going to give me those victory points I already have all over again? So it's really interesting. At first I thought, this is, maybe it's very abstract. I like abstract games. Maggie, not so much. There's not a lot of theme in them. But we both found that it was quite relaxing the feeling that it gives is quite a relaxing one. You're creating this beautiful flooring. But then as it gets towards the end of the game and you're panicking a little bit more or you've miscalculated and everybody else is still playing and you're like, whoa, I just did that so inefficiently. It was really fun. It was really interesting. Cool. I'd love to play it again.
Awesome. Yeah, I like everything Michael Kiesling does. I think anything I've played. So like his name on it alone is like, okay, I want to check it out. And then also,
got your attention.
And I saw it. Like I walked by whatever booth had it, and I remember seeing those wood pieces, and I was like, this is just like a cool game in terms of table presence. I don't even know like how it works, but I'll have to check this one out at some point. And it's called Intarsia?
Intarsia, yeah. That's
Intarsia.
It.
Cool.
Wooden inlays. Who would have known?
Board games about everything. We're learning stuff. Well, the first game I'm going to bring up, I actually almost forgot to put on my list here. And I'll just preface this with my list of games that I'm going to talk about were things that I either knew like nothing about going into this and ended up liking a lot, or knew very little. So a friend of mine and solo game designer who works with David Turtsy, Chuck Case, ended up bringing this game called Spectacular to the table one night. We were playing some games and he's like, I don't know much about it, but it says it plays in like 30 minutes. And I'm like, okay. It was a Gen Con 24 release. It's designed by Elif Svensson and Osmund Svensson, and it's published by Chili Fox Games. Now, this is a game that plays 1 to 6 players. And when you look at it, it is going to give you like this Arc Nova Light feeling, because you're creating your own animal park. You're placing tiles and dice on top of the tiles. I'm not the hugest fan of Arc Nova. Like, I like it. I don't like how long it takes to play a lot of times. And for whatever reason, it just doesn't like excite me that much. Like, I'm not one of those people that's like, I want to keep playing this. Like, sure, I'll play it if you say, hey, you want to play this game with me? You know, so
I feel exactly the same way. Controversial.
I know it is. I know it is a controversial opinion. But so this game, you know, as I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, we'll see. Like, I didn't think it was going to be like my cup of tea, and it surprised me. So one of the things, everybody has their own boards, almost like the zoo board in Arc Nova. And there are hexes where you're going to be placing tiles, and the player boards are dual-sided, so there's a symmetrical side, or you can play with an asymmetrical side. And there are also like missions you can add if, you know, once you have the game or if you want more puzzle to work with. But the neat thing is this is a meaty, puzzly game that can be played in 30 minutes. And it probably took us an hour as all new players kind of like learning from the rule book. But I'm like, if people know how to play this, like this is a very cool experience that doesn't take that long. And so what you're doing is everybody has their own little stack of these tiles of they're different colors, and they'll have different animals on them. And then you also have an initial pool of dice that you'll roll. And so you'll have this like deck of tiles and then these dice that are, I think there were 4 different colors, yellow, gray, blue, and green. And then you have this board above your player board where at the beginning of the game, you're going to roll a number of dice and you're going to take a number of tiles from like the main market or supply and put them on there. And when it's your turn, you take 2 things. You take one thing from that board that's above your player board and one thing from your personal. So maybe I take a die from this board and then I take a die from my board. I could totally do that. Then you're going to place those dice or whatever you took. Like maybe I take a tile from one place, a die from it's up to you. But after everyone has done that and then you placed whatever you took on the board, your mat, we slide that whole tile that has the supply items, kind of like you're taking a whole tile and passing it. So there's like this drafting thing where everybody's playing simultaneously, but you are definitely looking at what dice are available on the tray that's kind of getting passed to me, because like if I don't take this gray here, I'm going to, need it later. And the dice are supposed to represent like food that the animals can eat or something like that. So each of the tiles has like some kind of like, you can only put yellow dice on yellow tiles. But there are some tiles that I don't know if they were called habitat tiles or something like that. They have a little heart on them. You can only place a die value 1 or die value 2 on there. So there's some rules with that. Generally, you want your other dice that are touching, you're making a path, very similar to Arc Nova. You want your dice to be as high as possible, because there's a multiplier when you score that's like, take a contiguous group of matching tiles, sum up all their dice, and then multiply it by the number of heart tiles that you have that have dice. And you only score the ones that have dice on it. So it's like a double thing you're thinking about, like, oh, I want to get the right dice on these tiles. And, the other cool thing about it is on some of the tiles, they'll have this little 1/3 slice of like a pie or something. And there are 3 colors. And that represents, if you're able to connect 3 of the same color pieces, you get to build a little lighthouse, which is this like cylinder, pretty much a wooden cylinder. And the cool thing with that is once you have a lighthouse, you can start placing 6s around there. Because if you don't have a lighthouse, you can't put a 6. You top out at 5. So
interesting.
And also the lighthouses are worth points at the end too. So it was just kind of a neat looking game, and I'm just very impressed that it can be played so quickly. I like the drafting and the simultaneous gameplay too, and it never really got like tripped up. You know how some games when you're drafting, like, oh wait, are you passing me 3 cards or 2 cards? I'm behind. You know, it never got that way because of the way you're sliding these little boards to the next player. Somehow it just like it worked. And this is a game that I tried to go get the day after I played it, and this was selling out fast.
Yeah, so this was one of the games that Maggie had a disappointing day one with. So
Oh no!
I sent her there because actually this was a recommendation from Rado, who has just been talking about this game nonstop. He loves it.
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
And I hadn't heard much about it, but I was like, okay, it's definitely going on the to buy list. But luckily we had some members of our community who happened to be walking past the store when they restocked it in the middle of the day and knew we wanted it so badly. And so they purchased a copy for us. So we do have it. Haven't
so
played it yet.
Awesome.
Yeah, you've got to have people scouting for you at Gen Con.
Yeah, I had my friend Chuck knew I was trying to get it the next morning, but I didn't get there in time, and he went to look, but it was just too late. And I'm like, I question, I'm like, I don't know, do I need to own this game? You know, is it something I'm going to play a couple times? I'm not really sure. Like, I think the fact that it plays so fast, and I love the tactile, the look of it, like having these tiles with colorful dice, and then when you build the lighthouse, like it just looks cool and it's very puzzly. So yeah, I think I want to get it.
Can I ask, do you think that it felt, and this is a question for Maggie, not for me, that it felt thematic? Did you feel like you were building an animal park? Because you keep talking about tiles and dice, and I'm dubious.
Okay, so let me think about this. Well, you could yes, Maggie will find something very thematic about this. One of the cool things is one of the scoring at the end of the game. One of the things that scores is I think the diversity of animals in your zoo.
Okay.
And I don't know. She'll have to try. You'll have to report back to see if it's thematic enough. Because, yeah, I was just like, oh, I'm putting tiles. Does Maggie like Ark Nova? The zoo building part of that?
We both felt, it was kind of like a in the sevens for us.
Both
thematically and mechanically. It just, we like it and we'll play it if someone else sets it up. But it's not one we reach for.
Okay, well, I'll be curious to see if it feels, because I don't think it felt thematic. It didn't feel super thematic, but I think you could make it feel thematic if you try.
Okay, well, I really like the design team on this one. I really loved their game Come Together. So
I've never played it.
Oh, you would love it. And
I know. I don't know why I haven't played it yet. Yeah, I don't know why I haven't played it yet. But that's on my list now. But I forgot it was the same designers. And is it one of the designers that co-designed Revive also, I think?
Oh, okay. Oh, really? Huh, there you go.
I think so.
Yeah, so that is
but I might be wrong. Yes, it is spectacular. Okay, what's the next game on your list?
The next game on my list was one that I wasn't expecting to play at all, and these things always happen when you're at a con. But we were we were at one of the board game shops that's nearby Good Games. And of course, because, you can't get enough board games when you're at a convention, so you have to go to all the board game stores as well.
Yep.
We actually met up with David from Man vs. Meeple, and also board game ramblings as well, so Johannes and Sunniva. And we had the opportunity to sit down and play MESOS, which is actually an upcoming game from Cranio Creations that's being launched at Essen of 2024. So it wasn't releasing at Gen Con. So this is probably a bit of a little wild card on your list here. But I did play it. It's designed by Yaniv Kahana and Simon Luciani. So anytime I hear that name, I am in.
Yep.
So I definitely wanted to sit down and try it. It plays 2 to 5 players, and we were playing it at the full 5-player count. But at in this game, essentially, you are a tribe leader at the beginning of mankind, tale as old as time, literally. And you're basically hunting, gathering, and building, and you're doing that through drafting cards and building out a tableau of cards. And the most interesting thing, I think, about the drafting mechanism in this one is that cards come out and they form a top row and a bottom row, and then you are placing in turn order like a meeple-like piece that is just going to dictate how many cards you take and whether you're taking them from the top row or the bottom row of cards. And if the further left that you place, you get fewer cards, but you get to go first. And the further right that you place, you get to take more cards, but you're going to be last in turn order. So, classic mechanism that creates tension. So you're thinking about, well, I really could use actually more, like multiple of those cards on the top row, but if I go last, I might not get them because other people might take them away from me. So it is a game that's all about set collection. And so there are the cards that you're bringing into your area, or the different, they are different professions that you're bringing back into your area. We were talking to Maggie about how thematic she thought it was. And she's like, well, I can kind of see that the professions do different things, but I would say it's kind of a light theme.
Gotcha.
But you're doing set collection. So some of the different professions want you to collect different symbols, and then others are going to enable, different scoring mechanisms that happen. But I think another thing that's really interesting about this game is that there are cards coming out of the deck that you're going to be drafting, but shuffled into the deck are the scoring conditions that are going to occur. So the scoring is like an event that happens, and you don't know what order things are going to score in. So you're building up your tableau, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, guess what? It's time to feed your people because
snap. That's the event that popped up. Okay.
Exactly.
Cool.
And have you collected enough of those cards that allow you to feed some of your people without having to have food on hand? Maybe not, because you don't know when it's going to come out. And so that each type of card is going to score once per round, but you have no idea about the timing of that. And then as we go through the rounds of the game, those same scoring conditions are going to come out, but they're going to become more and more brutal if you haven't achieved them along the way. So the game really escalates in terms of those scoring conditions, and it felt like everybody was kind of specializing in one or two different areas, and it was interesting to see how all of those different strategies played out. So it was a really interesting and unique take on that kind of tableau building experience. I will say at 5 players, it was a little bit long. And of course we were learning it as well, but it just felt like, oh, maybe this went on for one round too long. But I feel like it's probably a good game that would be best at 3 players or something like that. But it was really interesting, and I only played it once, but there was enough in it where I was like, I think people are going to like this game.
Cool. MESOS. Yeah, I have not heard of that, and I can't even picture it, but it sounds really interesting. The more you talked about it, the more I was like, oh. And I love the card, like the scoring cards that are kind of shuffled in. That totally reminds me of what I love about like coin games and PAX games. But like, I guess the difference is like, you don't know necessarily when those like kind of interruption scoring cards are popping up, but you do know how they work. So I like that this game, you don't know which one's coming or when they're coming. That sounds really cool.
Exactly. But you do get at least one draft to think about it, because they move from the top row to the second row, and they score once they're in the second row. So things do move along. So they come out, and then you're like, that's going to score next round.
I got to figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. But then, of course, because everybody's thinking the same way, everyone wants to draft the same card. So it just creates more tension. And you can also build some buildings that give you different ways of collecting points as well along the way. But yeah, this is an interesting one. That is MESOS, coming out at Essenspiel.
Awesome. And my next game is an Essenspiel release too. It's a game called Altay, Dawn of Civilization.
Was this for sale?
No. It's just Essen. But you want to know what? Like, this was literally, number one, I didn't know the hall closed at 4 on the last day. And I'm like going around, like, I'm just going to get more last minute footage. And then I was walking by Ares Games booth, and that's who the publisher is. And I was like, what is that on the table? And I remember seeing that Paulo Mori co-designed this, and I didn't know much about it, but I'm generally like a fan of every Paulo Mori game I've ever played. So I was like, oh, let me check this out. And I was able to sit into what I thought was going to be a demo, but we actually played almost a full game. Like we were just about to finish and they were about to shut the lights off. So we had to wrap it up. But Altay is designed by Ole Steinus and Paulo Mori, published by Ares Games. It is a very I don't want to say it's like super unique, but it's a very fresh feeling deck building game with civilization building, and everybody has their own asymmetric like fantasy faction. And the art style on this game is just like stunning. It looks like how do I even say? I'm bad at describing art, but it looks nice. We'll just say that. It's very nice, and it's very different for what you would expect in this style of game. But basically on the map, you have like these different types of terrain. Like you have mountain spaces, forest spaces, some water areas, and everybody has their own like starting deck, like any deck builder, but there's something each faction specializes in. So everybody's starting deck is different. And then as you play, like on your turn, you play the cards in your hand. Some cards will generate resources that you can spend to get other cards and do other things. But the flow of it goes really nicely because one of the things they did rules-wise is you cannot carry over any resources. So you can't just like stockpile resources and then take forever to figure out what you're going to do on your turn. So it's kind of like snappy. It's like, okay, this card's going to give me a food. This one gives me a wood. Oh, wait, I have a town in a forest. So this card will actually give me 2 wood, which is nice. Like their cards are multi-use. And then you generate your resources and you spend what you can. Whatever's left over, you get a coin for. And then if you have 5 coins ever, you can trade that in for a resource of your choice. And there are like kind of basic cards you can add to your deck. You have like people, because think about it like you're building your civilization. You have lumberjacks who are going to help you get wood. You have hunters. You have miners who help you get metal. But then you're learning things because it's civilization building, right? I learned engineering. I had to get all the resources I needed to learn engineering. But when I did, I can now trash a card to draw a card once per turn. And when I learned commerce, now all of a sudden I can trade resources and do different things. And it's really cool because 2 things I really like about the card play in this game. One, you get that tech tree building of getting these different things like engineering and learning commerce or whatever. They have different levels, and it's like, well, once you have a level 1, you can get one of these level 2s that are available.
Nice.
And then you can't get another level 2 until you get another level 1. So it's like, got that. And you can only work on, I think they're called achievements. You can only work on one at a time. And the thing that's smart about it is that you're building this tableau of these different achievements. Your civilization is learning and gaining and everything. And the one that's active, because you can only be working on one at a time, you put one of your, I guess they're called towns, these like chunky pieces that are amazing. You put one of those on the track and the card shows which resources you need. And as you get those resources, you can put them on the card. And once you've kind of built that thing, then you also get to add a new town on the board. Towns are good for lots of reasons because number 1, you get more resources, but you're also, because it's civilization building and there's area control, you're also trying to spread out because one of the ways you get points is by having control of different areas. The combat system is very much like, I guess, like deterministic in that you're not rolling any dice or anything. You're going to have cards that have a number of swords And there are some like kind of NPC things you can take care of on the board that are going to be worth points. But you can also attack other players. It's not like the main thing of the game, but there are some territories that are going to be stronger. And that is kind of a variable setup thing. The other thing I liked is you have it like a deck building game. You have a market of cards you'll be buying for your deck. And you'll spend resources to, now I can make towns or, do all this stuff. But there are 2 levels of cards. You have like these basic 6 cards that you can get. And then there are these really cool ones like cavalry. And I love this thematically because the very first person to take, like, let's say a cavalry card, you have to pay the most resources for it, but it's worth the most amount of points. I take that card. The card below it might be worth, 1 fewer point, but you need like 1 or 2 less resources. And it's because like, hey, I learned this, and now you can kind of see my example and you can copy it. And so it's easier for other people to do it after one person's done it. So anyways, so that
interesting.
that was kind of neat. But overall, it just like feels like a very clean design. I love deck building. I love like the fact that I'm building my like civilization, have these custom abilities, like the look of this game. And again, these chunky wooden pieces, like they said they're going to have plastic minis as like an upgrade, but I'm like, who would ever want the plastic minis when you can have these big
chunky wood pieces.
Like they're like almost double the size of root pieces. Like it's just,
oh wow,
yeah, all right, maybe not double, but like bigger than root pieces. And it's just a really, really, I'm so excited about it, and I'm so glad that I stumbled by this booth right before it closed on Sunday.
I can't believe at Gen Con the number of times you can walk that hall and still miss things.
Yeah.
Because this game was on my radar when we were putting together our most anticipated list. This, you mentioned the artwork. The box is very striking. The box art, like really beautiful. And that caught our attention first of all, but we love deck building. But I had no idea about the tech tree element. So that has put it even more on my radar. I'm really excited to be able to play this one. It sounds really interesting. I wanted to ask a question.
Yeah.
It's based around multi-use cards. How big is how much table space do you need for this game? How big is the box?
Okay, so the box is like a 12 by 12, and the board is actually relatively small. So, and that was one of the things, but you will be putting cards like, so, at the bottom of the board, we had the 2 rows of card market. And then on one side, we also had the achievements. So there were like 3 rows, and there'd be 3 cards face up that you can kind of shop from. And then beyond that, our tableaus, like the table space was getting a little tight, only because it was like kind of a demo table. But my tableau, we almost finished the game, and I had maybe like 4 or 5 cards in front of me. And so it's not anything crazy. And I really actually did like that the board is not huge. Like the board is small, but there's lots of cool stuff going on,
Yeah, because it sounded like you were doing so much. So I was like, how big is this game? Like how sprawling is this game?
You will have a lot of cards set up around the table, but like it's not that crazy.
Okay.
Yeah. But I really, really enjoyed it. That is Altay, Dawn of Civilization, and I'm pretty sure it's due out at Essen. And yeah, I was just like, this is my jam. This is my jam.
I'm so jealous.
Well, should we talk about something we got to play together?
Yes, please. This game was this was my number 1 most anticipated game of Gen Con, to which everyone was like, how is that possible? Because it's cooperative. So this is the spiritual sequel to The Crew. It is The Gang, which is a cooperative Texas Hold'em poker game.
Yep. Yes, and it I always like to let people know I did get a review copy of it, even though I haven't played my own copy. So when we played, we were playing someone else's copy. I'm not a poker player, but unlike Amy, I do like cooperative games. But we both had some, I would say, issues as we were learning and playing. Well, we also had a challenge because we were playing with 6 players. A lot of us were like, we're just a different group of mishmash friends. And the way this game works is you have a deck of cards that's like regular old poker cards, and it will get dealt a hand of 2 cards, which I think they call the pocket or something. So everyone will get 2 cards, and then after you look at your 2 cards, we have to, without talking to each other, take poker chips that are ranked to convey and communicate how strong or how weak our hand is. And so after we do that, we'll take there are 4 different colors of chips we're going to be taking in the same as the game escalates. So, maybe I'm dealt 2 aces. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to take the highest number chip. This is a pretty good hand of 2 cards.
And just like in poker, you've got the central cards as well that is like the collective cards.
Yes.
So you're trying to build the optimal poker hand using the collective cards and the cards that are unknown in your hand.
And it kind of picks up. So after that initial round of like, we just got 2 cards and we gave each other some information. Hopefully it was good information. Then we revealed the 3 cards in the river, maybe? The 3 public cards that are face up on the table. And then we do the same thing. But now we have like yellow chips. And we then say like, oh, I still think my hand is really strong, or hey, maybe my hand got weaker, but we're not talking. We're just taking these rankings of poker chips from each other. Sometimes, let's say like I have a really garbage hand and I take the 1, and then Amy is like, she takes the 1 from me because she's like, no, I have a garbage hand. And then we got to kind of look at each other like we're playing the mind or something. And like, I think my hand's more garbage than you. And, and then, after you do that, you flip another card out. So now we have 4 cards face up, and then we do it again. And then the 5th card comes out and we do it one last time. And then when the 5th card is out, whatever ranking we are thinking we need to make sure is correct, or we lose the round, or we fail.
Yeah, that's right. That last ranking is the only one that counts. And the reason why you rank in previous rounds is to give everybody information around the table. So you can look around, and if you know poker well, you can think clearly that person was going for a flush. And then something went wrong and a card was revealed, and they went from thinking they had the best hand to the worst hand. And so you can kind of deduce what people have in their hands if you're good at poker.
Yeah, and you definitely, I think this is a game, and I said this every time. I think I ended up playing this 2 or 3 times over the span of Gen Con, but it's definitely a game where, like, if you think about the mind, a lot of people have played the mind. It's a limited communication game where you're trying to make sure we're all playing our cards in ascending order from 1 to 100, and it's like, maybe your first couple games, you don't have the rhythm of the timing of like, oh, when do I put out this 24 or whatever? But most people know how numbers go from 1 to 100, whereas valuing a poker hand is way more challenging, especially with a different group. Like we found that some people were ranking their hand based on potential. Some people are doing it based on like what they currently have, which I think is what you're supposed to do.
And they do provide you with a reference card that shows you the ranking of different poker hands. So that does help if you haven't played that much poker. But what's interesting is I think that card doesn't give you the likelihood of you getting
the odds.
hand.
Yeah,
the odds, right? So if someone who's played poker a lot knows that it is really rare to have a straight flush, for example. And so if you have that hand, you need to grab that token, that number one token, as fast as you can and communicate that to everyone. But if you're not familiar with poker, you might be like, well, I guess that's good. Like, it's higher up in the ranking.
Yeah.
Is this a good hand? Or if you've got a full house or something, you're like, I don't know how this relates to the likelihood of someone else having a better hand. So that element, I agree with you that I feel like if you know poker well, it's going to really shine this game. If you don't know poker so well, it's going to be an interesting experience if you're playing with people who do know poker. And I think that I can speak on behalf of both of us that we had a pretty interesting first game of this.
Yes, your quote was, "This is why I don't like cooperative games." Because when you make a mistake, everybody like blames you. And I was like, I feel that.
Yeah, and we won't name names of who we were playing with, but
we won't name names.
I will. I definitely. I realized something about that idea of like co-op versus competitive players, because when people say, do you play co-op, and you're like, no, they assume that you're an aggressively competitive player because you only play competitive games and you don't play the nice, friendly, cooperative games. But I just don't believe that to be true, because cooperative games, especially this one, because everybody needs to have, and we were playing with 6 players, and everybody needs to be in the exact correct ranking order. So if you were the person who thought you had a great hand, but you had a terrible hand, well, you're going to be blamed by everybody for messing up the ranking. And so I would say pick your gaming group well.
Yes, and talk strategy before you deal the cards of like how you think certain things should be ranked. Because you know what the other thing was, and I don't remember if it was our game or another night, but someone came up to me and they saw my hand of cards, and they had played this game, you know, the day before, earlier that day, and he was just like, you should take the highest token. Like, this is an awesome.
That was our game.
That was us. Okay. He's like, you should take it. And I'm like, okay. And then his friend walks over. He's like, yeah, that's it. That's the. So then I was like taking their advice, and I take the chip saying, I have the strongest hand. And I did not have the strongest hand. But like in their game that they played before, that was like 2 pairs was a super strong hand. So it's a complex little game, but it's very satisfying when you get it right. Oh, and we should talk about the cards that you get at the end of the round. If you fail the mission, and should we talk about the theme of this game? I'm putting air quotes up. You're like, what are we trying to rob, a safe or something?
Yeah, we're doing a heist. I don't think that comes through at all. But also, we haven't mentioned the designers or the publisher, just FYI.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, we just got right into it. So the gang is designed by John Cooper and Corey Heath, and it's published by Cosmos, which you kind of alluded to when you said the spiritual successor to the Crew. But yeah, Cosmos is always like coming up with like Inside Job last year was really, really awesome. You know, a social deduction trick-taking game, and semi-cooperative that one was. And yeah, now we have the gang that's a cooperative Texas Hold'em game. I've been excited about this since I heard about it at PAX Unplugged last year.
Yeah, I mean, who would have thought? And we got to meet the designers, John and Corey, and they were just such lovely people and clearly very passionate about poker. So, who would have thought to make it cooperative?
Yeah, it's a really, really neat idea. The other thing is, like, if you don't succeed in your mission, like, we didn't rank our hands in the right order.
Thematically, if you didn't achieve your bank heist, I believe is the theme.
Alarm, right? Yeah.
You set off the alarm.
You set off an alarm. So there's an alarm card you kind of flip over. They found us, or not quite, because if you get 3 alarms, you lose. And then if you're successful, you flip over this, like, it's a safe card looking like we broke into the safe. So I'm sure Maggie really approves of the theming here.
Yeah, it is light, to say the least. It is very, very light.
And then if you're successful, because like technically you could like probably proxy this game very easily, but the thing that makes it even spicier is these cards, like that if you fail a mission, you get a helper card, which is supposed to help you out a little bit. Sometimes it does more than others, depending on, because I think there are like 20 different cards. Oh, and we learned that you're supposed to play them in order. Like there's an order.
There's an order?
Yeah.
We've just been jumping straight into this game.
Yeah. and then if you're successful at the mission, you get this card which is going to kind of be like a weakness and for the next hand. So there's a lot to like it look, this is challenging. I played it quite a few times. Like this is what I consider like if Splotter or like Cole Worley made their version of the mind, because it's like a 3-dimensional thing trying to get this right. It's challenging, but again, it's so satisfying when you do. And I did get one round right with a group of 5. At some point.
With a group of 5, that's pretty impressive. We also were able to be successful with a group of 4, which of course is much easier than with a group of 6. Like so much easier.
We did not set ourselves up for success playing with the.
We did not, but it was
jumping
a lot of fun.
It was, and definitely memorable. So that is the gang. What's your next game, Amy?
My next game is a game called Middle Ages. I don't know if you're familiar with this title, but it is a remake of. It's a remake. They've actually changed some rules. They've completely changed the art of Majesty for the Realm, which is a game designed by Marc-Andre, who is the designer of Splendor. And it's published by Studio H, and also the player count is 2 to 5 players. But this is a fun game to talk about because we actually really love Majesty for the Realm. So the original game is one that is in our collection, and I believe it is out of print. It's been really hard for people to find. You've been looking for it?
No, but I had it and I played it and I liked it a lot. I don't have it anymore. But I did have it a couple years ago and I really liked it. Like, I think Marc-Andre like makes really cool games. Like Barony's really cool. I don't know if you ever played that one.
No, I haven't played that one.
Okay, put it on your list. But anyway, go ahead. What? Yeah, tell me about Middle Ages.
Yeah, so Majesty for the Realm and Middle Ages is really a game that's all about drafting and creating a tableau that is like an engine builder that is going to give you more and more money. That is the points in this game, the bigger you build up your tableau. So they have that in common, but they're actually quite different in the way that they play out. So the drafting mechanic has changed. So I'll talk about Middle Ages first because that's the game that was being released at Gen Con. But essentially, you are drafting tiles in this kind of King Domino-esque style where you are placing your worker piece out to indicate which tile you're going to draft. And just like the game I was talking about earlier, you are then going to be taking those tiles in order from left to right. So again, if you want the tile on the right, you're going to get to place that later in the turn order. And you're adding it down into your tableau. And what's really cool about what Studio H has done with Middle Ages is that it all clicks together in this like puzzle-like player board where every piece just satisfyingly goes in the right spot and it builds out a picture, and it's just I can't even describe how much that adds to the game. It just is really beautiful, really tactile. So you place it in, and when depending on the type of tile that you're collecting, because there's all of these different parts of your kingdom, you're going to be placing it down, and it's going to score, it'll give you coins for every other tile that you have of that type, first of all, but also give you some kind of action. And the action that occurs in this game is the really fun element and the interactive element, because you can attack other players. It's not devastating, but if you, for example, build up like your, I guess the tile type that represents your military, if you have more military tiles than people have defense tiles around the board, well, first of all, they're going to have to pay you 2 coin, which is the victory points, which is great. But second of all, you're going to destroy their leftmost tile, and that's going to get put off to the side. Yeah. But they do get the opportunity to rebuild. There is a tile that allows you to rebuild things that have been destroyed by others. But also there's like a windmill action as well, that if you build a windmill tile and you have more than everybody else, well, then you're going to take income from them as well. So you're going to get 2 coins from every player that has fewer windmills than you. So essentially you're just looking at what everybody else is doing and how you want to build out your tableau. And then you're trying to really kind of commit to a particular type of tile so that you can build up this engine. And as the game goes on, you're going to start getting a few coins every time you place a tile. But by the end, you are getting, you're feeling really rich because every time you place a tile, you're getting so many coins. There's some other fun things that are going on in this game. The game plays over 4 rounds. And at the end of every round, which is drafting 4 tiles, there's going to be an event, and that is going to score something or it's going to do something detrimental to your tableau. But you know what that's going to be in advance, so it gives everybody a little bit of an objective to work towards as they're drafting tiles, and of course makes it more competitive because everybody's going for the same things that they know is going to score at the end of the round.
Right.
So that's one fun element. They've also introduced the church and like the noble kind of tiles. They allow you to customize the bonuses that you're getting when you add tiles of other types. So they have these little coins and little tableau like symbols that click into the bottom of your player board. It's very hard to describe without showing, but it allows you to change the rewards for different things. And that is a really nice addition that didn't exist from the original game. So if you've played Majesty for the Realm, it is a little bit different in that the drafting mechanism is different. Probably the biggest change is that you can see the future of the next 4 drafts that you're going to be taking. And so you can kind of plan ahead a bit better than Majesty for the Realm, because that only has a single line of cards that, of course, is very it can be a bit luck driven because you don't know what's going to come out of the deck next. And so there is a more strategic element of planning ahead. They've also added an element where you can reserve a tile in the future as well as one of the tableau bonuses. So again, you can kind of work towards something a bit easier.
Cool.
Yeah, and the scoring has changed a little bit as well, but there's still this idea of you really want to have at least one tile type of each region in the kingdom. Otherwise, you get penalized at the end of the game. But yeah, that is Middle Ages. I really love the new artwork and the satisfaction of having the tiles that click in together, because the original game was all card based, so it was a little more loose and wild with cards going everywhere.
Nothing like good components too, huh?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, actually, this is going to be a funny segue into my next game. Because I do have a gripe with this one, even though I like it.
Okay.
The next game I'm going to mention is Comic Hunters. This is another one that my friend Chuck, who introduced me to Spectacular, brought to my attention. Chuck and I guess we see each other at Gen Con, and sometimes he comes to BGG Con. And so usually right before, it's like, hey, we should try to meet up and play some games. And he told me about Comic Hunters, and I'm like, I'm not into comic books. And then you see it on the stairs. I don't know if you remember that. They advertised it on the stairs going up to the 2nd level. And I was like, you know what? Let me check this out. Let me check this game out. And
I like how you're so casually checking it out, Candace. And this was literally the hotness that everybody was trying to line up for.
Yeah, completely over my head at the time. And I'm just like, okay, I'll check out this comic game at some point. And and then so I go over to Spin Master's booth, and I hover over a demo, and then I'm like, oh, I got a feel for it just from hovering. But then I was like, I want to sit down and actually try, play it myself. So I joined the demo, and it surprised me how much I enjoyed it. So at that point, it's middle of the afternoon, one of the days. Of course, they're sold out. So I had to use my my BGG privilege and say, can you give me a review copy? I'm sure you have one back there. Please, I will play it. And I did. I played it with the quad crew. And then I played a partial game with someone else. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Comic Hunters. I think it came out maybe in Brazil or somewhere else internationally earlier. Right. And this is the first time it's more widely available. It's designed by Robert Kelho, and it's published by Spin Master. And I think Arcane Wonders is also going to be printing. I don't know if it's a different edition, but it plays with 1 to 4 players. And in this game is a set collection game where we are each building up a comic book collection of Marvel specifically. And one of the cool things about this game is that every card has real comic book cover art. And it's so cool. Even though I don't care about Marvel or comic books, I still I'm like, this looks awesome. And it's one of those things where as I play the game, I'm not paying attention to it because I'm more so paying attention to the icons that I need to play the game. But it's something that on future plays, I want to actually look at them more because some of the cards have facts about these comics and everything. So this is to me, if you're into Marvel comics, this is a no-brainer. But I'll just tell you how it works too. So you play over 3 rounds, and each round you're going to first have 3 comic book collection phases, and they have 4 different locations that you're going to collect comic books from. There's a flea market, convention, I think the store, and an auction. And each round, there are going to be 3 of these locations where you're going to be collecting some comic books. And then after those 3 trips to collect cards, then you're going to have a moment where we all simultaneously start building out our collection, basically paying for the cards we want to keep. And it's one of those games where you pay, the cards each have a value of 1, 2, or 3. And let's say I want to keep, card 5 different cards, and the total is 11. Now I need to spend cards by discarding other comics that equal that value to pay for it. So you can't keep everything you're getting, and you have to be selective, and you're going to be selective based on what is scoring. So a couple other things. One of the neatest things about this game, and which was, I think it was the thing that made me curious to try it, I heard there were lots of different drafts that you're doing. So I think I'm trying to remember which one it is. One of them's just a standard draft. Everybody gets 4 cards, keep 1, pass 1, keep 1, pass 1. We have 4 cards. I forget if that's the store or what that one is. But then you have if you go to a convention, the draft is different. You lay out this 5x5 grid of cards face up, and you leave a gap in the center. And then whoever is first, you can take all of the cards of a specific type of comic from 1 row or 1 column. And I should say, each of these comics has an icon, or sometimes 2 icons, of which type of superhero it represents. So you have Iron Man icon, Hulk, Doctor Strange. I don't know. There are 8 different comic book icons. and usually at the end of the game, you're going to score based on diversity of your collection. So if I have I have a set of Black Panther comics and Spider-Man and Iron Man, the more different sets, then I'm going to score really well on the diversity track. But each game, because I like shifting scoring conditions, there's going to be 1 comic book hero that is valued above everyone else. And then there's a second tier that's valued a little lower. And then there's a third tier. And then that's where you get into your standard set collection. So if Spider-Man is at the top tier, and I have a collection of 10 Spider-Man or 10 Spider-Man comics in my collection at the end of the game, I get 20 points. I don't know the exact numbers offhand, but then maybe if Hulk was on the next tier down and I had 10 Hulk cards, that might be only worth 15 points, So it's you have all these decisions of, do I want to go and try to diversify, or do I want to go all in on something? Then the cards also have this other icon. I forget what it means, but each game you're going to put 3 of these on a track, And then they're scoring based on who has the most, second most, third most, fourth most of these icons on the comic books that they're collecting. So you have lots of decisions with which cards do I want to keep? Number one, what can I pay for? But maybe which icon I want to push ahead of on those 3 tracks at the bottom, or do I want to just have a lot of, whoever's the best comic for this game? And it's so cool. It's so cool. And there's one phase that's an auction where you're putting out cards, and then whoever is first is going to pick one of the rows of cards and auction it off. And then the other one is the Colorado style, where you have a row per player and it starts with 1 card. And on your turn, you either take all the cards from one of the rows and you're out of the round, or you reveal a new one and add it to one of the rows. And then this goes around and goes around until something's really enticing. And then you try to take it before someone else does. So that's super cool. I also like that the convention one is that 5x5. I didn't really talk about how you can shift cards around, but to me, thematically, that represents you walking around this convention hall. So it's just really neat. So, okay, you tell me your thoughts, because you knew about this going into Gen Con.
Well, I did. Well, look, I knew about it going into Gen Con, but I'm like you. I have never engaged with comic books, and even the Marvel universe is not something that appeals necessarily.
Same.
But once we got to the con and once we realized how, there's so much hype around this game, and that's something that's exciting about conventions, and you kind of just get swept up in it. And so actually, this was the number 1 place that I sent Maggie on day 1. And even though we were quite close to the door, she got in this ridiculous line. They cut the line, and I think it was 100 copies. And so they sent her away basically with no copy. Day 2, we do it again. So we go straight for this line and again get cut off. And then on the third day, we had another couple, and we planned a strategy. We were like, you can only buy 1 copy per person. So both couples are going to go to different doors. Whoever gets there first, buy 2 copies for the other couple. And so we did that, and they got there and we did it, but they picked us up a copy. So we do have a copy of this game. And the thing that really got me into it was the same thing as you, the mechanics. I was really intrigued about this different way, the different ways of drafting. I love listening to how it sounds like they're very thematically intertwined with the mechanic. And even if you're not a comic book collector, I think being in the board gaming hobby, we could all relate to collecting.
Yes.
Collecting in general. So I'm really excited to play it now.
Yes. And what I'll say is we had some issues with the rule book and the components. So the cards are great. The cards were fine. On the backs of the cards, it tells you what the values are. It tells you how to build the convention deck. That's all cool. But the part that kind of bothered me is that the cardboard pieces were so thin, and not even that's the biggest problem. The biggest problem for me was they have this, and the game board is small and it's cool and it's thematic, and they have this the round or the game structure there, and they make this component that's a check mark. And it's huge. It does not line up with the round thing at all. You have to kind of so I'm already if I, continue playing this game a lot, I'm going to sub out a cube. I'm going to update some of the components. And I'm hoping maybe when Arcane Wonders does it, they make some adjustments to that. So that was my only gripe.
Yeah, I know that people are already, creating Etsy packs of upgrades for this game. Maybe all of the money went on the Marvel licensing.
Yeah. Exactly. It could be something like that. I know they definitely it didn't have any plastic on the outside, and so they were being environmentally, aware.
Oh, we love that.
Yes, definitely. But this is a game, again, that surprised me a lot. I didn't think I was going to be liking it as much as I do, and it's really fun. So that
Very cool.
is Comic Hunters.
Comic
and
Hunters.
I look forward to hearing your thoughts when you and Maggie get to play it.
Great.
And now a word from our sponsor. Do you consider yourself a lucky person? If not, you might be on the lookout for the upcoming release Trios, a board game by upcoming designer Arne Alsdiem Siepem and Lookout Games. In the tavern, you've heard of a lucky potion that can be yours for 20 gold coins. The realm is vast, its forests dark, and the roads dangerous. Lucky for you, courier runs pay richly, so off you go. Fulfill orders in remote corners of the realm, complete quests and side quests, deal with robbers, and outmaneuver your competition. Who knows how many luck potions there are anyway? The first player to collect 20 gold wins the game. This strategic family game comes with simple rules, a fast setup, and is easy to play, yet not easy to win. Choose from 4 asymmetrical characters, each of them with their own set of movement cards to explore the map. And if that wasn't enough variety, you can lay out the game board in over 1,500 variations, creating a new world with every game. Be ready to lace up your boots this October and try your luck in Trios.
The next one is one we both played.
Yes, this is a surprise for both of us, right?
It was. I had no idea. I'd never heard of this before until it came to the table at the BGG Hot Room.
Yeah, it's the same thing. And I think that's one of the fun things, again, about being at these conventions, because you never know who you're going to be hanging out with, who will just be like, here's a new game that's not out yet that you should try. And this game is called Castle Combo. It's designed by Gregory Grard and Matthew Russell. And it's published by Ketchup Games. And I saw on BGG, it also said Pandasaurus Games. So I think Ketchup Games is French, possibly. And so maybe Pandasaurus is going to be distributing in the US. I don't know what the deal is, but it's a 2 to 5 player drafting game. Again, we are with drafting, and we're tying it back. We're tying it back to the drafting of Comic Hunters, but also the Middle Ages, like medieval kind of fantasy theme.
Yeah, but this is much cuter. This is so cute, this art.
It's so cute. It is really, really cute. Basically, you're taking turns drafting 1 card each turn till everybody has a 3x3 grid. And, it's like the kind of game where it's like you have to place a card adjacent to another one. And it has to be, by the end, a 3x3 grid. The thing that's kind of neat about it, to me, is that there are 2 rows that you can take cards from. And there was this little marker guy that is like a pawn or something, but it was a cool wooden token that is going to be next to one of the card rows. And there's a village people kind of card row, and then there's a noble people kind of card row. And you can only draft a card, and you have to pay for it, from the spot where this wooden pawn is. And unless you spend a key, and then you can move it. And then sometimes when you take a card, it will instruct you to like move it, to shift it down or up. So I'll let you share some thoughts.
Yeah, well, I think that, I love that concept of, having to have that second economy of keys, essentially allowing you to have a bit more agency in what you choose. Yeah, you know that.
You and Maggie were the key masters. So we had so many people that Amy and Maggie just teamed up. And oh my gosh, all these keys were just getting hoarded over there.
Yeah, I don't think we won in the end, but we did have a lot of keys, and because there's these, you're collecting either coins or keys, and then there are different cards that are going to allow you to score for those 2 different collections as well, which is really cool. I don't think that the game is necessarily doing too much new when it comes to building out the tableau, but the game has a lot of character, because the illustrations are all different cute little characters that are either the nobles or the villagers. And it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek in how the characters kind of interact with each other thematically. So there was like, a noble that wants to have no villagers around, and then there's like a nun who only wants to have other members of the clergy surrounding her. And so it's just really, I don't know, there was something very charming about this game that kind of captured all of us, I think.
Yes, absolutely. And it's by the same company that put out Far Away. So it's like, here you have another just clever card game that doesn't take that long to play with like really good art. And one of the funny things I'll mention is while we were playing, I kept being reminded of some other game and I couldn't think of the name. I'm like, reminds me of something. This reminds me of something. Eventually, maybe 20 minutes into the game, I remembered there's a drafting game called Paper Tales. And there was just something about this game that was like reminding me of Paper Tales. And then we found out that it's the same publishing company, but they're like, not related. It's just like, I don't know how my mind made a connection between these.
That is amazing. The networking that happened in your mind. But the best thing about that moment was we spent about 20 minutes trying to guess what the game was. Candace was giving us the worst clues. So she was like,
it's a drafting game.
Yeah, it has cards. And we're like, okay, could you narrow it down a little bit, please?
I'm like, okay, white box.
A white box. And we're like, this is not helping.
It was hilarious, but I got there. We figured it out. I got there. But this is Castle Combo, slick little card drafting game. You're right. It's not doing anything like groundbreaking, but there was something charming and fun about it. And my friend Steven, who was playing with us, like, he loved this. He's like, it was like such a surprise and was one of his favorite games he played all weekend. So it's got something.
Yeah, and Maggie felt similarly, and it's that's the thematic overlay to all how the characters interact. I think she really loved that.
Yep, cool. So that's Castle Combo. Tell me about something I didn't play, Amy.
Oh, well, I'll tell you about a game called Chandigarh, I hope I said that right, which is based on an Indian city. And really, you are an urban planner that's been put in charge of developing the city. This game was released just before Gen Con, I believe. I don't know if it was for sale at Gen Con, but it was one of those games that Maggie and I, in the lead up, we had a bit of time to get over the jet lag on the way in, and this was a game that we pulled out and played just her and I.
It's cool.
Designed by Tony Lopez, who is the designer of Ada's Dream, which is a big Euro that kind of just came out, and it's published by Ludo Nova. It's it plays 2 to 4 players, and it's a very abstract city building game where the map of the city is the main board, and it's just a grid. So classic city style game. And you each have an architect that is moving throughout the city, and you can move it through the intersections. And when your architect stops in one of the intersections, you have the opportunity to build these chunky wooden buildings that are going to sit in each of the blocks of the city. But the cool thing about this is that in order to get new buildings so that you have the opportunity to put them out into the map, you have to collect these project cards. And so on your turn, you can either move your architect and build a building or collect a new project card. But the project cards, they're kind of multi-use cards in that they have 2 reasons why you want to draft them. One is there's a little connecting puzzle that runs along the bottom of them, and depending on the project card that you put that next to in your own collection of project cards in front of you, that dictates the 2 types, up to 2 buildings that you're going to get as a result of that. So the first thing you're thinking about, which project card do I want to take, because I want to get pink buildings, so I need to take this project card. But the other thing about the project cards is it's the main way that you score points in the game, because they have scoring objectives on them. So now you're like, well, I want this pink building card, but actually it gives me a scoring condition that's not that useful to me right now.
Oh, cool.
But then it becomes even more interesting, and I think this is the best part about the game, is when you bring a project card in front of you, you can have a maximum of 3 cards. So 3 objectives that you're working towards, and this relates to patterns that are on the board. So maybe you want to have 3 pink buildings in a row, or you want to have a diagonal set of green buildings, whatever it is. But you can only have 3 at once. When you bring a fourth project card in front of you, you have to put it on either the left side or the right side of the 3 that you have there, and it's going to bump one. When it gets bumped, that's when it scores. So, yeah.
That's interesting.
So it is really interesting because you're collecting these cards and you're working towards these scoring events. But to get those scoring events, to make a lot of points from these scoring events, you need to have the buildings. So you run into this problem of, well, I need to get more buildings, but if I get the buildings, it's going to score the thing that I'm working towards. And I'm not going to have the opportunity to place them. So you've got to really make sacrifices in terms of the objectives that you're willing to let go in order to build towards others. So I really liked that dynamic. It's really interesting. The game itself is super abstract. Did I feel like I was building this beautiful city of Chandigarh? No, I did not. But I could see how they've built this puzzle on this idea of that tension between scoring and getting buildings, and it's really, really clever.
Ooh, sounds really cool.
You hadn't heard of that one?
No, it's Chandigarh. No, I don't think so. I'll have to look it up later and see if this is ringing a bell, but it sounds really, really cool. And I love that dynamic of pushing a card out to trigger the scoring of that card. That's cool. I love abstract strategy stuff anyway.
Yeah, it's pretty abstract. I think you'd have to like that kind of game. I don't know if it'll stay in our collection, but I really appreciated that new take on that tension, that mechanic there. And also I want to try it at a higher player count as well, because we only played it at 2.
Yeah. Well, this is another synergy here, because the next game I'm going to talk about is called Tower Up. And this is a game that Eric Martin just kind of discovered at Gen Con. It wasn't something that was on like the BGG Gen Con preview or anything. Like, we didn't really know much about it. And frankly, like, if I saw the box cover, I probably would walk right by. Like, it doesn't grab me.
Yeah,
but if you,
it was a bit gray.
Yeah, but if you see it on the table, you'll be like, ooh, I want to play that. So Tower Up is a Gen Con 2024 release designed by Frank Critton, Gregor Largi, and Sebastian Pochon. And all 3 of these guys co-designed Maui, which was the towel laying game where you're like putting, I don't remember exactly how it worked, but it was cute. It came out a couple of years ago. But Sebastian is the designer of Jaipur and Metropolis. And I love both of those games so much. But Tower Up is from Monolith Board Games, plays with 2 to 4 players. Super light. It plays in probably like 45 minutes, maybe faster. Similar to the game you were just describing, you get 2 actions that you can choose from, and you do one thing on your turn. You either get resources or you build. To get resources, there are 3 cards available face up that maybe have, let's see, there are 4 different color bricks: black, brown, white, and gray. Yeah, so it might be a card that has 1 brown, a white, and a gray block. And so if I take that card, I get those blocks. And one of the things that's really cool about this game is that they have a tray, like the insert is functional for the game, because you just take that whole tray out, the cards lay on top so everybody can see them. And it it's very, very, very nice. But when you build, I think you start with a number of random single level blocks on the board. And when you build, you have to build adjacent to where there's an existing block or building. And what you do is you place adjacent to it. And then you also have to place a block on top of the one that you're adjacent to, every single one that you're adjacent to. So if I'm wanting to place like a brown tile or a brown block over here, but it's adjacent to an existing gray and white, I also have to have those resources to build up those buildings. And something I should definitely mention is you can never build the same color adjacent to each other. So if there is a gray building, I can never build and start another gray building adjacent. So you have this kind of like puzzly approach to how you're building. And then when you build, after you put the blocks down, any any buildings that you touched, like the one that you built up and the one that you just started, one of them you're going to cap with one of your little, we'll call them rooftops. So each player has these rooftops, but they're not really roofs because you can build on top of them. So so maybe I choose to, if I built, I forgot my example already, but let's say I choose to put a roof on my little single gray block that I added. If I do that, I have a player board where I'm going to slide my gray marker up 1. And these markers are very cute. They look like little trucks and cranes and stuff, but I slide it up 1 level. Now, if I had placed my roof instead on the double one where I had to like overbuild, then I get to move that track up 2. And so you have this track that is keeping track of when you are building on, when you're placing your roof on different colors and how many blocks are there. And so the cool thing is there, you get more points at the end of these tracks the further you are. But if you build out equally, you hit these little stars where whenever your last marker hits this star, you get an extra action. So it's like you want to keep everything flowing, and each of those are going to be worth a number of points for however far they made it over at the end of the game. The other thing is, just because I just built my rooftop on this building, Amy, doesn't mean that on your turn you can't place somewhere else. And now you put a block on there, and now you can put your building on there. And I don't lose any credit for, okay, I guess I didn't say something, but they're also 3 scoring objective cards. And these are cards where you're racing to be first to do stuff, like have one of your markers on a space that's touching water, basic kind of stuff like that. And I don't want to like minimize it, but you know what I mean? It's like objectives like, oh, have something in each of these 5 districts, or build a 3-story black building or whatever. They're different. They're like, I don't know how many cards come in, but you'll play with 3 of them. And whoever... Go ahead.
Sorry. How many rooftops do you have? Do you get your rooftop back?
Well, that's actually the trigger for the end of the game, is when the player puts their last rooftop on. So you end up, as you're building this up, you're building these stacks, and sometimes they'll have multiple colors on one stack if different players kind of contributed. So it's like a game where, again, you're kind of building up a city that looks really cool. And the funny thing is, before knowing that Sebastian Puchon was one of the designers who did Metropolis, I got Metropolis vibes from the way the districts are and the table presence. I'm like, I love Metropolis because you're putting these blocks out, and as the game goes on, you're making this really cool looking board. So if I'm first to complete an objective, I get to take the 7-point token for that objective. Next person, 5. Last 2 slow players get 3 points. So there are 3 objectives we're racing towards, but you're also trying to push these tracks up. And it's all with this like really simple, do I take resources or do I build? And it's so slick and easy to teach and smooth and looks great. And so this was like such a fantastic surprise at Gen Con for me.
Yeah.
Did you take it home?
No, I didn't, but I remember Eric talking about it, and I kept trying to look at the demo tables to see what it looked like on the table, because like you, I was like, oh, the box just, I'm not sure. And I was a bit concerned that it was going to be a bit too light, but it sounds really interesting, the dynamics. Like, it sounds like there's enough meat on the bones to probably keep heavier gamers interested. I've been around Maggie too long, because I was just trying to think about thematically this rooftop idea of you constructing a rooftop and sitting and kicking back with a cocktail and a view, and then someone comes in and is like, actually, I'm going to continue building this.
We're going to build this higher.
We're building higher. You need to move on.
Exactly. It does have like a very unique table presence at the end of the game. I think I played it 2 or 3 times at Gen Con, because it's like that easy to kind of bust out and play with people. I really, really like it. Like, this one is definitely, I'm going to carve out a spot on my shelf for it, in that.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That like, that window of games that are like easy to teach, play in less than an hour, like, really, really cool. So
I'm definitely going to have to check it out now, because that covered in shelf space. I know that you know.
Not
You've
every
got
game I bring
limitations.
back from Gen Con is going to end up on the shelf.
Yeah.
But Tower Up for sure. I really, really dig it. So anyways.
Yeah, great. And the next game we're going to talk about is another one that we played together.
Yep.
But actually a game that I've played so much since we got given a review copy of this game. It's called Now, and it's a card game. Now with an exclamation mark. Sorry, now. And it's designed by Silvano Sorrentino, and it's published by Randolph and Scorpion Mask. I always say Mask, but it's Mask, isn't it? Every single time I say that, everyone always corrects us in the comments. And it's 3 to 8 players, and it's a really interesting real-time competitive card game where everybody. The most interesting thing I think about it is that everyone has an asymmetric deck that sits in their hands with the card facing upwards. So at all times you're clinging on to a deck of cards that has one number showing, and what you're trying to do is you're trying to essentially use that number on top to bid for a range of cards that make up a market in every round. And these cards have 2 different colors on them. I think they're either teal or red. Right. And they each have different notches of points that are shown on the top right-hand side of the card. So you're trying to collect these cards, but at the end of the game, you're going to have to minus the sum of one of the colors from the sum of your greater I didn't describe that correctly. The one that you've got the most of is going to then subtract the one that you have the least of. So what are you trying to do? You're trying to get all of one color and none
ideally
of the other color. Yeah, that would be the ideal plan. But it's real time, and so what everyone is doing is we say go, and everyone is shedding cards from the top of their deck. And
which you'll never get back, by the way.
Yeah, you'll never
when you discard these are gone
through the game.
Oh yeah, that's right. There's a reshuffle moment. Yeah,
there is a reshuffle moment, but you don't know when that's going to be. But you are shedding cards, so everyone is just stripping away cards, and then at the time where you think you have a great card in hand, in the palm of your hands, you're going to shout now, and everyone around the table is going to shout now at some point. And then the person who is still searching their deck, once everyone else has said now, has 2 choices. Stick with the card that's on top of their deck, or move to the next one, which they have no idea what it's going to be, but it might just be a better card than the one that they have in the palm of their hands. Yeah. And then you're going to win cards that are in the market according to the person who is Price is Right rules is how everybody has described this game.
Yes.
Who gets closest to the number without going over it. And you have to take the cards that you qualify for. So sometimes there might just be a market of all red cards that you don't want to collect. So you want to just aim for a really high number that goes over all of them so that you're not picking up any of those cards.
But then sometimes you get screwed anyway and are forced to take cards you don't want to take. The other cool thing about those scoring notches on the side of the cards is that you can, as you score cards, you kind of splay them, and it's showing you your, how many points you have of different colors. And I thought that was just like a little clever little design touch there.
And there's also, so every deck is asymmetric, which is interesting. So everyone has a different set of numbers in their hand. And then every deck has 4 cards that perfectly match 4 numbers in the shared cards that you're bidding for. And those perfect match cards, they have, they're white cards that can be either teal or red. And you are kind of deciding which scoring pile you want to add those into. So that's another little fun dynamic as well. And then, of course, because it's real time, you are shedding cards out of your hand. And at some point, you are going to start to run out of cards in your hand.
Oh, my gosh.
And if you get to the last card in your deck, that's going to be your bid forevermore until that reshuffle card comes out. So if you're overly ambitious and you get to that last card, well, guess what? You've just locked in your bid and everybody knows what it is. And that's really bad news.
Yes. So that is now quick, fun little card game that can play up to 8 players. And it's, everybody's simultaneously deciding when they want to stop. So So that one was cool. And I played it for the first time at Hachette's media event the night before Gen Con opened. That was my first time playing it. But I wanted to give a quick shout out to another game that I played there and the year before at Hachette's party, which is Seaside. So last year I played a prototype of it. This year it's out. It's a game by Brian Bourgogne, and it's published by Randolph. And it plays with 1 to 5 players. And this is like gonna be my beach game, not just because it's called Seaside, but it's just a great travel game because everything is in a little pouch. And you have just like, I don't know how many wooden discs. You have these wooden discs that are screen printed or painted. I don't know. I don't know how they're put together, but they're nice. They feel great. And your setup is get the bag. That's it. Your setup. And then on your turn, you're going to take one of these wooden discs out and decide, they have something on each side, something different on both sides. And you're going to pick which side you want to activate for your turn. And that's it. Next player does that. Keep doing that until all of the tiles are gone or the discs are gone. The bag is empty. And then anything that's in front of you, you stack up and you see who has the highest stack and you win the game. But one of the cool things is like you have 3 like sort of resource options, which are rocks, shells, and like these worms or sea bugs or something. Anytime you choose to keep one of those, you're going to put it in the middle of the table into the sea and you get to draw another tile. There's a little arrow on the bottom that says draw another tile. Then you have crabs, and crabs want to be around rocks. So if you, okay, maybe I'm doing this backwards. Crabs are the food, not the rocks. So crabs, shells, and worms, because if you have a rock, it's nothing. But if you take your second rock, you get to take every single crab that's in the sea. And you get to take one from one of your opponents, pretty much. But you only do that every time you get another pair of rocks. Yeah, that's what it is. And then you have like beach tiles. And when you take a beach tile, you put it in, it's like you're building a shoreline. And so for every beach tile you have, you'll be able to take shells from the sea, from the center of the table. And then you have seagulls or some type of bird, and they want these worms. So when you take a seagull, you can take as many worms as there are in the sea and you put them under the seagull. Now, the trick with the seagull is the next time you want to take a seagull, if it's bigger or smaller than the other seagull in terms of the stack size, the amount of worms you fed it, it's not going to work. You're going to have to get rid of one of them. So you're aiming to have the same size seagull stacks. And then there's a wave, which if you take that, you flip over one of your beach tokens, then you resolve that. So it's a lot of just like draw this, stuff happens. But we just had so many funny moments with this game because, like, especially if multiple people are collecting rocks and we're trying to get those crabs. And so we joked and we were like, the top crab on my stack, I think, was we named him Bernard. And then so the next person who got crabs stole Bernard from me because I was the only person to steal from. Now there are multiple people that have crabs, but we kept stealing Bernard. And it was like... it was a little thematic thing. So I want to write on all of my wooden discs. I want to give them names. I want to give the crabs names and the birds. Had you played this one before?
I played it in its original form at Essen last year. So we played it a lot back when it was a prototype as well. So I haven't played the final, but we still have that prototype. And I agree, it's such a cute game with a beautiful and really different quality to it, because all of those beautiful chunky wooden discs that are essentially waterproof. I mean, I wouldn't want to leave them in water, but you could play it, by the beach or
at a park,
when you're
on a train, whatever. Yeah,
I love that element of it.
Cool. Yeah, I'm really digging it. I think I've played it like about 4 times now. So that is Seaside. And I think we got maybe a couple more games to talk about, but
Couple more games to talk about. I've got a really little game, a really fast one to talk about. It's the fastest game to talk about and the fastest game to teach. It is a game that we discovered at Gen Con because someone taught it to us, and it wasn't released at Gen Con. It's a 2023 release. It's called DroPolter, and it is a dexterity game. And we're not very well known for, loving dexterity games. We own a couple, but this one has just absolutely captured my heart. It's designed by Paul Schultz and published by Oink Games. So it's in the little Oink Games box, and it plays up to 2 to 5 players. And in this game, very simply, in the box, there are bits and pieces, and everyone is going to have the same 5 items that they have to hold in the palm of their hand. And there's a deck of cards, and when a card gets turned over, and it shows you what everybody needs to drop onto the table from the palm of their hand using only one hand. So in your hand, you might there's like a little key, there's a little shell, there's a little cube, and, the card might say cube. And so everyone has to drop the cube out of their hand without using their other hand. And then the first person to do that grabs the little ghost that sits in the center of the table. So you grab the ghost, and then you win a point. But the best thing about this game is the victory points, because the victory points in this game are these tiny little bells. Oh. And these bells get added to the collection of items in your hand. And if you drop your victory points from then on, you lose them. So I just think that this is just such a simple but brilliant concept. Yeah. I also love that they made them bells. So when you're playing and someone
when they lose their points,
it hits the table and it alerts everybody that they have made a horrible error. And this game is so much fun. Actually, the day that I went straight from the airport to my office, I had this on me and I taught everybody at work. And
awesome.
It was just so much fun. And we played it so many times at Gen Con. And I purchased 3 copies of this game just to give as gifts, because I really think it has a lot of charm, and it's just an excellent filler, just a re-energizing game. But those little bells are what really makes it. And also, it has an easy mode where you drop them by looking at what's in the palm of your hand, so your hand is face up. Or it has an advanced mode where you hold everything with your palm facing down.
Gosh. You just have to
and
feel
you can't
it.
See. You just have to feel it. But also try to hold on to those little bells when your palm is face down. It's impossible. It's so hard. I'm terrible at this game. But that is DroPolter.
Yeah, I played this once earlier this year, and I had that moment where I dropped like 3 victory points. But somehow I ended up like coming back, and I think I won that game. But yeah, it is just different, silly, fun, and very challenging. And I'm only, because you brought up an Oink game that you discovered for the first time at Gen Con. At the airport, I played for the first time ever. You ready? Deep Sea Adventure. Is that what it's called?
First time ever?
Exactly, exactly. I've always heard like good things about it. And my friend was playing it with some of his friends at the table. And we were just like, we walked up and we got in the next game. And I loved it. So anyways.
It's so hard.
Late
that game
to
is
the party.
So hard.
Oh yeah, it's so hard. I'm not going to get into that, but I will share another game that I was very excited about. It's not a Gen Con release. It's more of a Q4 release. But I did not come into Gen Con knowing that I was going to get to leave there with a pre-production copy of The Elder Scrolls Betrayal of the Second Era. This is the new chip theory hotness, designed by quite a few designers: Josh Carlson, Michael Gerns, Logan Giannini, Ryan Howard, Salem Scott, and Josh Wilgus. And this is a chip theory game. Everybody knows, probably, who listens to this podcast, how much I love Too Many Bones. But this is a cooperative adventure game based on the Elder Scrolls video game series. Plays with 1 to 4 players. And when you play this game, you're going to play an adventure. And an adventure is played over 3 sessions where you'll be questing and like leveling up your character. And it's so cool. I'm 2 sessions deep into my first campaign. This was one that I, jet lag. My friend Steven and I were like, let's play this as soon as possible. Like I checked this on the plane because I was like, this is my precious. Like I've just been like so excited about it because I had no idea that I was going to be able to get a pre-production copy at Gen Con. So this was like a really, really positive surprise for me. I'm really, really liking it. So I've coined a little expression that this game, Age of Innovation, too many bones. So last year, Age of Innovation was like one of my favorite games, especially at Gen Con, like highly anticipated. And I loved how it took Terra Mystica, Gaia Project, and opened it up in terms of like variability of how you create your faction. And Elder Scrolls, so far as I'm playing it, is like it did that with it Age of Innovation Too Many Bones. So instead of having this one gear lock where you have, this setup, this pool of like 12 dice or whatever, that every time you play that gear lock, this is your dice. These are your dice you can work with. Sure, you can skill them up in different ways and follow different paths. But this game, you get to like kind of like you pick a type of character. Then you're going to pick a class and there are all these different options. And then from there, you can develop different skill lines however you want. So if I want to be a stealthy dark elf, I can. Or if I want to be, an acrobatic Argonian, I don't know the video game series at all, but I'm loving it so far. So I wanted to mention it. I'll be talking about it more in the future, but just like it definitely has been taking us longer to play it than I think the 2 hours per session that they were advertising. But like, we're still like looking at rules and stuff. I made a little player aid for our second session and it's just been really fun. If you like adventure games or exploration games where you can like choose to, you're moving on this like overland map and deciding, if I move to a town, we get to do a town actions there. If I move to a place where I'm going to have a clash, that we're going to have a fight, we're going to set up a battle mat. And it's like so puzzly how you try to like fight. And the components in this, and this is a pre-production copy, they give you a card tray. They give you like, the dice are nice, everything. They even thought about like people saving their campaigns and the trays, you can just put the thing away. Actually, I have not figured out how to put it away yet. I'm going to do that after this.
But it sounds like you don't need to because you just want to keep playing it. So.
I do want to keep playing it. And I was, like we played a good chunk of yesterday and it's just so fun seeing how this story evolves. And Steven, who I'm playing with, like ended up getting some kind of item card that was underwear, and then somehow he got like a girdle, and we're just like, there's some interesting things happening with your character's discoveries. And then they have all this these like different food items, and it's really, really cool. So if you're a Too Many Bones fan, like regardless if you've played this video game series or not, this is definitely something to check out. And yes, I'm already excited to try more. Like each different map has its own little booklet, and there's so much. Oh, and we had to pick a guild. When we started the adventure, you pick a guild, and we were the Thieves Guild. So everything that we're doing, if we were a different guild, we would have a whole like different quests, and you can get side quests. Oh, I love it.
Oh my goodness. I am just in awe of the scale of their games. We had the opportunity last year we went to their head office, Chip Theory Games in Minneapolis, and they gave us a tour around and they showed us some of the things they're working on, including the Elder Scrolls. And with their games, I'm jealous. I've got FOMO because they're usually not in worlds or like themes that we enjoy, but I wish that we did. Like, the Too Many Bones, Maggie played it for a little bit and, it's just not our style, but I just am in awe of what they create.
Yeah.
An amazing team.
Yeah, I love it. I will say, yes, sometimes some of the games are harder to get to the table, but So good, so good. And yeah, we're just like enjoying like how, again, Age of Innovation, Too Many Bones, like the way you can customize your characters and level them up is so fun. And yeah, we've just been having a blast, and I can't wait to finish this campaign, see what happens, and then start another one. So that is The Elder Scrolls Betrayal of the Second Era from Chip Theory Games. And I think we should close out with a game that I suspect we're both pretty excited about, that we've had the opportunity to play.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. Yeah, we both love trick-taking games, and it's been something that we've bonded over, I think, every time we've had the opportunity to play together. And this one was at the top of my most anticipated. It's a game that I ran off, didn't leave Maggie to this one. I wanted it in trusted hands. So she's going to hate that I said that. And I went to buy Lone Wolves, which is a 2-player only trick-taking game by Yasuyuki Nakamura and Anthony Perrone, and it's published by Wonderful World Board Games. And this game combines trick-taking with a bit of area control or area majority, where you essentially are playing cards down in front of different regions that represent each one of the different 5 suits that are in the game. And so on your turn, when you're leading a trick, you get to choose where the location where you're going to play your card down into. And the values of the card are really important. So I think the cards go from 2 to 7. There's one interesting element that a 2 of the suit will always beat the 7 of a suit. But for the most part, it's going to be the highest value is going to win the trick. And what's interesting is that your opponent doesn't need to play their card into the same territory. They can choose which territory they play into, but whoever wins the trick gets to keep their card face up and score essentially the points towards that territory.
More strength,
more strength. But the other player has to turn their card over, and it becomes a lone wolf that is only worth 1 point towards that territory. But you might want to lose tricks sometimes, because when you lose a trick in a particular territory, you get to take this really cool token that's
Scar tokens.
The scar. Thank you for reminding me consistently about what the theme is.
Maggie's not here, so I got to cover.
Yeah, Maggie's not here to do it. Yeah. So you take these tokens, and these tokens are ways to score differently and mess with the game. And when you take a token, you get to place it into one of the territories on your side of the territory, and that token is only going to apply to you. But I love how I can just see you grinning when you're talking about this game, because we both feel the same way about it. It's so good.
Yes.
Yeah. And so these tokens are going to give you additional strength in a territory, or they might mean that you get victory points for every card that you've got in that territory, or if you win the territory, you get a bonus 5 points. There's all these different things, but within the territory, some are face up and some are face down. So there's that element of, do I take the one that I know I can use right now, or do I try and take the one face down and try and get the one I've been hoping for?
Right.
And then also is it the 3 that turns the tokens over as well? When you play,
I think so.
Yeah, when you play a 3 into a territory, you get to flip one of those tokens so it becomes more known information. And sorry, I'm just talking because I'm so excited. But also,
no, it's fine. I'm just excited listening.
How good is the Trump dynamic?
Oh my gosh, it is so cool. So, as Amy said, there are these 3 scar tokens in each of the 5 regions. Now, at the beginning of the game, there's no Trump suit. But the minute one of these regions clears out all those scar tokens, so whoever took the last scar token, that area becomes the Trump suit. And you put this, is it the blood moon or the regular moon? You put this moon token, and it makes it worth 5 more points, that area. So it makes that area stronger. And now whatever region that is, that suit is Trump going forward until if a second region ends up getting cleared out with those scar tokens, then you put this other token that's like a plus 3 points, like a blood moon. And now that is the Trump suit. And I'm going to tell you, I had moments where I'm looking at that and I'm like, I have a bunch of whatever the black suit is in my hand. And if it works out that clears and I have Trump, it's going to be amazing. And something didn't happen that way. Another one cleared out. But yeah, this game is one of like I was very excited about this, but I wasn't sure if it was even going to be available. I wasn't sure if it was going to be for sale. So when I found out it was, I was really excited. And when I was at the airport, I was like, I really want to break this out. Like, I really want to break it out. And I read the rules. As I'm reading the rules, I'm just like, this is cool. Like, this is cool. Wow. Okay. Oh, like, this is really cool. And then it just,
it kind of reveals itself to you as you're playing. Because you're like, sometimes I want to lose over here because I want to clear it out and make it the trump.
Right.
And it's just and then the tokens and the way that can change up the way territories score.
Yes.
It is a phenomenal game. It's so hard to make a good 2-player trick-taking game because really you're just playing one card each, and like how interesting can that be? But this is right up there. It's a bit too early to call that it's my favorite 2-player trick-taking game ever, but I think it could be.
I think it could be right now too, and I also think like I don't even want to just call this like a fantastic 2-player trick-taking game. It's just like a really cool 2-player game too, because I just got into Caper Europe, so I like these games where we have this board in between us and we're playing cards and we're influencing different things. But yeah, like what this does with those little scar tokens and also a few other things, like each region can have a max of 6 cards combined, so you can lock a region, lock your opponent out of a region, and then on top of that there are a number of cards that are out of play that nobody sees, and also a few scar tokens that are out of play that nobody sees. So you do have some like, it's not like, oh, if I don't have that too, Amy definitely does, my bad.
Yeah.
It's not like that because I'm like, well, or maybe it's out of play. And then it's like, well, if you do have the 7 and 2 of a suit, that's awesome because you can't get beaten by it.
Exactly. You know that you can't be beaten. I love that element of it.
But so many really, really interesting decisions with the fact that you can play your card. It's must follow, but you can play your card into any region on the your side of the board.
The saddest thing about this game is that Maggie hated this game.
What?
I know. And also it hasn't turned into an argument, but it's definitely turned into a heated discussion about how can you not appreciate the layers of brilliance that this game is.
And the theme of the lone wolf, you flip the card over and you have one howling wolf, you want to get scars.
Yeah, we both love trick-taking games as well, but I think it was the area majority element that she didn't quite like about this. Also, I did beat her numerous times at this game, and so, because I was just like, this is fantastic. I can see all the layers that are going on here. But so I'm going to have to find someone else to play with. I wish you lived closer to me.
I know. It's small enough that I'll probably bring it with me to Essen. We were
playing it. We were playing it when we got home. We were playing it when we were at a cafe having brunch, and it's just for me, it's like that perfect kind of waiting for your food, have a great game.
Yeah, and I love it. It's just like you get 13 cards and you play those 13 tricks and see how things end up. I also crushed it, by the way. So maybe we will need to do a championship round.
Yeah, that's going to be tight.
Yeah, but this game, this is just really like, you could ask my friend Steven, who was playing with me, like every time I played a card or he played a card, I was just like, oh, I really like this. Like, this is so cool. Like, this might be my favorite game of that I got from Gen Con. Like, I love it. I love it. Anyways, that is Lone Wolves, a fantastic 2-player trick-taking game. And also the other thing that attracted me to this, besides the area majority description that I read about it was one of the designers is the designer of Trick and Trade, which I also love. Yeah.
Yes, same.
So anyways, that's really cool. Well, Amy, it's your Sunday morning. I've taken up a lot of your time. I've had a blast talking with you and hanging out virtually.
I could talk all day with you about games, Candace.
I know.
It's such a joy. Thank you so much for having me.
It was awesome to have you. I'm going to have Maggie on at some point as we discussed, which I'm really excited about that because I feel like I kind of sit in between you where I don't need the theme, but sometimes I appreciate the theme. So I'm like the right in the center of the Venn diagram of ThinkerThemer. But yeah,
maybe that's why we both love you and resonate with your game taste so much.
Maybe that's it. But yes,
you're
awesome.
The thing that brings us together.
Yeah. But it was awesome hanging out with you and Maggie at Gen Con. Keep up the fantastic work with your channel. You two are doing fantastic things. I keep saying fantastic today. This is what happens when I record a podcast on a Saturday. When my guest is on Sunday. I'm getting loopy here. But yeah, no, great time. I'm looking forward to seeing you both at whatever, next con we cross paths at.
Dice Tower West. Come on down. Can't wait to see you there.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks again, Amy.
Thanks, Candace.
You've been listening to the Board Game Geek podcast, produced and edited by Candace Harris. Special thanks to Matt Fonda for editing and mixing our music. Be sure to visit us on the web at BoardGameGeek.com. You can also find us on YouTube, Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitch under Board Game Geek. You can reach us by email at podcast@BoardGameGeek.com. Thanks for listening and happy gaming!